Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, Africa's the worst hit by droughts that are going to get worse. As COP15 continues to discuss the threats of desertification in Ivory Coast, researchers warn that human behaviour has left billions around the world facing water scarcity. Also, Nigeria's national petroleum companies agreed to supply jet fuel to the country's airlines. Prices of fuel have tripled over the last few months, and operators have been prepared to stop all domestic flights. And as France starts ramping up for the Cannes Film Festival season, I speak to Nigerian director Abba Makama, who's just wrapped up Paris's Nollywood Week. He's part of a Nigerian collective trying to shake up Nollywood's output and has released the first Franco-Nigerian film production. But first, the UN's warning that man-made climate change means that humanity will face longer and more frequent droughts, that Africa is the worst hit continent so far. COP15 is currently being held in Ivory Coast to discuss ways of tackling the existential threats posed by desertification. Researchers say that 2.3 billion people are already facing water scarcity, and that number will double by 2050. The Horn of Africa is already facing debilitating dryness, and the continent suffered 134 droughts over the past century. However, the UN's Desertification Agency does say that with the right adaptation measures, water scarcity could be limited. Morocco, meanwhile, which is hard hit by desertification, is trying to turn the tide. The advancing desert risks gobbling up land that previously supported communities that could now see themselves displaced. On the front lines are OASES. Whilst they function as a barrier to the encroaching sands, they're also one of the first victims of desertification, as they are particularly vulnerable to climate change. Camille Nedlek has more.
Little by little, the sand is gaining ground. Most of Morocco suffers from desertification, and in rural parts of the country, that means previously fertile land that supported communities could become arid and barren.
Our suffering started when the strong winds were blowing, and here the trees were blocking the sand. But once they were swept away, the sand invaded us.
This oasis is particularly vulnerable. Oases are barriers against the desert's advance, but they are dependent on a traditional irrigation system which is impacted by droughts. And Morocco's droughts are becoming more intense and more frequent due to climate change. Rabat is trying to reverse the trend with the launch of a programme 2 years ago. It aims to plant 100,000 hectares of forest annually by 2030.
We're implementing a programme to fight against the encroachment of the sands, particularly in the regions of Arakitia, Zagora and Tingit.
It's not just Morocco, but the entire African continent that's being severely affected. And King Mohammed VI is calling for the creation of an African alliance against desertification.
At least 4 people have been killed in a suicide explosion near Mogadishu's airport. The blast happened as presidential candidates were heading into the heavily fortified site where Sunday's presidential vote will be held. Al-Shabaab extremists claimed responsibility for the attack. A curfew has been brought in around the hangar where the vote will be held. And Germany's agreed to raise its contingent in the UN's peacekeeping mission in Mali to make up for the shortfall left by a French pullout. Berlin said that the mandate in Mali has been extended to May 2023 and that an extra 300 troops will be sent in. France is pulling its troops out of Mali after relations with the country's ruling junta broke down. On Wednesday, the French Minister of Foreign Affairs was summoned before a Malian judge for an inquiry into attacks on the public good. Monsieur Jean-Yves Le Drian has been called to appear before the court in Bamako in June. Nigeria's state oil companies agreed to help cash-strapped airlines source cheaper aviation fuel. The deal's just for 3 months and comes after operators threatened to stop all domestic flights because of the huge spike in the cost of jet fuel because of the war in Ukraine. Samuel Okoya with more.
The deal for the supply of cheaper fuel to local airlines is a desperate attempt to keep the airlines flying after they threatened to shut down their operations in the face of high prices of aviation fuel. The deal was brokered by the Nigerian House of Representatives. Under the agreement, the airlines will get aviation fuel at a lower price of about €1.10 per litre for the next 3 months. This new price is about 51 euro cents lower than what the airlines currently pay for the product. Just last week, the airlines threatened to shut down their operations till further notice, saying that they are running at a loss because they are paying about €1.61 per litre of aviation fuel. What the airlines are currently paying for aviation fuel is about 3 times what they used to pay for it at the beginning of this year. The rise in price is partly due to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, a situation that has affected energy prices worldwide.
Well, France is gearing up for its world-famous Cannes Film Festival, which kicks off next week. In the run-up to one of the essential dates on the global filmmaking calendar here in Paris, we've just wrapped up the Nollywood Week event, which spotlit Nigerian cinema here in the City of Lights. Now, the movie industries of the two countries were brought a little closer together by the showing of the first Franco-Nigerian co-production, Juju Stories. It's going to be one of the first Nigerian films available to be streamed worldwide on Amazon. One of its directors, Elliot, came in to speak to me.
Juju Stories is an anthology film that focuses on African folklore, horror stories, tales, that we've grown up to know as Nigerians. And it also cuts across Africa and the African diaspora. So these are like myths and folk tales that people are familiar with, Scary stuff.
Yeah, and yours is called Yam, and it's about like a kid who turns into a yam?
So there's a popular myth and a folklore that if you find money on the floor and pick it up, you instantly turn into yam. And it sounds bizarre, but it's actually a proper belief. You see it in newspapers, you see it reported as police cases. It's quite bizarre. It's a bizarre phenomenon.
And you wrote that?
Yes, that's my segment, yeah.
Okay, so Juju Stories is the work of a collective, and it's that collective that worked with the French production company in this co-production.
Yes.
First of all, tell me about the collective, because you even have a manifesto. You really see yourself as the new wave of Nigerian cinema. Why, it's not that old. What's the new wave supposed to represent?
Well, I wouldn't call it new wave. I would say it's more alternative. It's like an alternative to mainstream cinema. And the SURREAL 16 was founded in 2016 by 3 filmmakers who happened to be fans of each other. We saw we were making films that were had a certain panache, so to speak, that spoke to each one of us. We were cinephiles. We made films that were traveling to film festivals. And we just came together and formed this collective in 2016 as an alternative to the type of mainstream movies that were coming out from the continent.
So maybe for those who are not familiar with mainstream Nollywood cinema, because Nollywood is the second biggest cinema industry in the world.
Absolutely.
What is mainstream Nollywood cinema?
Mainstream Nollywood cinema is quite similar to Hollywood at this moment right now. There's a star system. It's heavily focused on commercialism. If this genre is working, that's what the industry is going to ride. It's going to be a season of
I think you got tired of wedding films.
Yeah. And not that there's anything wrong with it, but rarely do you have like a singular vision, or an auteur has the opportunity to tell a singular vision, so to speak,
And so the other two of your collective,
yes.
Who are they? And does everybody have a different style, or do you all work very well together because you reflect something similar?
Well, we have similar tastes, but we obviously have different styles. There's Michael Amonua, there's CJ Obasi, and everyone, like I primarily do satire, and there's a lot of surrealism in my work. CJ, you could see heavily the influence of Martin Scorsese and horror. He's also into like horror genre. And I mean, that doesn't, not to say he doesn't have his own style, but you can clearly see his influence. Michael Monwa is heavily influenced by like Japanese cinema. There's a lot of minimalism. Rarely people speak in these films. And these, these type of films are not very popular in where I come from. So it's...
But you're hoping that they're going to be, because it's going to be available on Amazon very
absolutely.
soon.
No, we've definitely started some sort of a following and sort of a new wave, but it's definitely not mainstream. Yeah.
So is your stuff high concept, or would you describe it in some other way?
I think, it could be. So for like my films, they are quite philosophical, they're layered, but there's also humor because it's satire. Like Nigeria does comedy, but I also do comedy as well. But my type of comedy, I wouldn't describe it as slapstick or like ha comedy. It's a bit more layered.
Well, brilliant. Abba, thank you so much for coming in and giving us a bit of an insight into your singular vision of Nigerian cinema. And congratulations for being streamed, for Juju Stories being due to be streamed on Amazon. Relatively shortly. That is, though, unfortunately, all we have time for Eye on Africa. That's it. For now, join us again if you can. Take care.